world. And I think it is now time to introduce our speaker, Joti Brar, the Vice Chair of Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninism.
Small panic there, I thought I'd lost my glasses. Comrades, it's wonderful to be here on this occasion. You know, I'm not going to list all of the amazing achievements of the October Revolution. We have done many meetings where we did a brilliant job of that, and there's lots of speeches, and I ask all of our viewers online and people here tonight who haven't heard all those wonderful speeches about October to go to our YouTube channel while it's still there, Proletarian TV. It's full of amazing tributes to the October Revolution and some really eloquent testimonies of exactly what was achieved in the Soviet Union as a result of October. But I think tonight we really want to focus on the legacy of October. You know, the October Revolution opened the era of socialism and national liberation. And that is the era in which we live today, no matter what the reverses, temporary reverses of history, because history never moves in a nice straight line, unfortunately. Some of my comrades say it moves in a spiral. I prefer to say, you know, if here's the line, it kind of goes up and down like that. The general trajectory is this way, but, you know, it's not a simple progress from one system to the next. We are in the era of socialism and national liberation, which was opened by the October Revolution. And with us, we have representatives of China. The Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese Revolution brought October into Asia. The Cuban Revolution, the Cuban Communist Party brought October to Latin America. These connect Marxism to the entire globe. It was the October Revolution gave new life to the anti-colonial movement, the national liberation movement, precisely because it based its analysis of imperialism on science, and that science spread like wildfire across the globe after October, after the success of the Bolsheviks. Everybody wanted to know, what is this? In India, in China, in Latin America, all around the world, people who'd never heard of Marx said, what is this that's just happened? We need to know. In 1921, when the Chinese Communist Party had its founding congress in Shanghai that famously moved to the Red Boat, there were, I think, you'll have to correct my numbers, I think there were 21 people there, and 2 of them were from the Soviet Union. The Soviet influence on the national liberation struggles of the world was immense. In India, when Bhagat Singh and his comrades were on trial for rebelling against the British, they sent greetings to the Comintern on Lenin's birthday because Bhagat Singh had been inspired by the October Revolution and the writings of Lenin. This was the period when communist parties all over the world were founded. Even in Western Europe, where officially what they used to call social democratic and which after the October Revolution became communist parties had already existed, new parties had to be formed from the revolutionary wing of parties which had gone rotten and betrayed the working class during the great conflagration of the First World War. So this was the period following October in which our movement really took its birth and found its legs, thanks to the great feats and the great organization of Lenin and the Bolshevik Party. And the Soviet Union provided not only inspiration, not only a huge literature from which we could learn the tactics and theory, not only of understanding imperialism, but of organizing to fight and overcome imperialism. It also provided a practical base for the world revolution. And we must never forget that. One of the earliest supports that was offered to the world revolution was the foundation by the early Soviet Union of the University of the Toilers of the East. They straight away began to educate leaders of revolutionary movements from around the world in Marxism, in the in the practical work of organizing. They trained them militarily, sent them back with arms, with money, the ability to found and develop, anti-colonial movements in their country and to lead them on a more scientific footing and with connections always to the Soviet motherland, which was truly a motherland not just for the Soviet people, but for the workers and oppressed peoples of the world. And of course, we know the real high point of the achievements of this period of socialist construction that was unleashed by the revolution, by the Bolsheviks, reached its apotheosis in World War II, the smashing of the Nazi war machine, the phenomenal change in the balance of world forces that was brought about through that time. And it's that which really changed the nature of imperialism, or the presentation of imperialism, I should say, in the West. After World War II, European imperial powers were broken. In mainland Europe, totally broken. In Britain, really crumbling. And they needed to re-establish themselves. They needed two things. One was massive financial injections and support, political and economic and military support from the USA. And the other thing was they needed to buy off the revolutionary sentiments of their workers. And that is what they did temporarily. They created welfare states as a kind of pale imitation of what a real revolution would have brought the people, to convince the working class that there was a peaceful road to socialism, or that socialism in fact wasn't needed, that they could have a civilized life, civilized conditions, under conditions of continued capitalist exploitation. The great tragedy for our movement is that the communist movement in the West was at the same time bought off and neutralized. And this is why we have this situation that Comrade Joseph pointed out for us today, which is that while on the one hand, the boom that the imperialist system got from the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern European People's Republics, that gave it a big shot in the arm, a big financial injection when it was in trouble at the end of the 80s, that boom has passed, and imperialism is more decaying and parasitic and in a deeper crisis than at any time before. All the objective conditions are there, the ripening of all the conditions and the absurdity and obscenity of the contradictions of the system are deeper and more obvious than at any time before, and yet the subjective force of a strong, united, theoretically equipped vanguard communist movement is missing, because where parties are big, they let go of their Marxism, and where Marxism exists, it's not connected with the masses. And this is really the job, the primary purpose of the movement at this time. It's the primary goal that faces us, is to rebuild this connection between Marxism and the masses. We've lived through a difficult time period, comrades, and there's no doubt about that. You know, Joseph Stalin predicted, sadly, foretold almost. He said, he gave an interview to a journalist, I think it was from America, and he said, what will happen if the Union of Soviets should fall? He said, the workers and the oppressed peoples of the world will be seized by the throat. Well, is that not precisely what we saw in the period following 1991? Were not the workers and oppressed peoples of the world seized by the throat? Have they not lived through the most horrendous times, not only in the Soviet Union, not only in the former Eastern European People's Republics, in all the remaining socialist countries? Wasn't the screw put down harder? Weren't people put under more and more pressure? And what about the workers in the imperialist countries? What happened to our wonderful peace dividend? Yes, there was a shot in the arm for the imperialists, but the deindustrialization and the attacks, not only on our jobs, but on our services and our infrastructure, accelerated. They didn't slow down. Despite the fact that the imperialists were making a whole load of money looting the rest of the world, they also felt confident to push down at home, because the opposition had been neutralized and demoralization was rife. There's a reason why there are so few members of my generation from the West active in the communist movement, and certainly who've been active since I have in the 1990s. Because when we were leaving school, communism was officially defeated. Our working class movement had also been defeated in the 1980s. We were taught the class struggle was over, and for the mass of people of my generation, they believed it. They were despondent and cynical, and they didn't have a leadership able and capable to inspire them with confidence in themselves as a class. They allowed themselves to become more and more fragmented, individualistic, isolated from one another, and steadily our sense of ourselves as a class has been systematically taken apart. Nevertheless, we remain a class, and we remain the power that has the potential to switch this situation completely. We see today in the world that there is a new upsurge in the anti-imperialist movement. Joseph talked to us about the flipping of dependency relations. You know, on the one hand, as imperialism has continued to exist for another 100 years, way past its, decaying sell-by date, it has become more and more and more parasitic, to the point where it's really, really hard to find a worker in the imperialist heartlands who produces new value. We're all of us, in some way or another, living as parasites, even the poorest amongst us. We have to recognize the nature of our economy. It's not a personal insult. It's a truth about how our economies have become. The export of capital has meant that rather than sections of our economy being totally parasitic, as was noted by Hobson in 1902, now the vast majority of our economy is non-productive and parasitic on the labour of the rest of the world. Well, okay, the capitalists, the financiers at the very, very top of the tree are continue to loot the world through this mechanism. They're making hay. But for the majority of the people of Britain, this is an undignified, demoralising and increasingly impoverished way to live. More to the point, it's incredibly fragile. Incredibly fragile. Stop and think about this for a minute. We're still consuming products every day that somebody had to make. If they're all coming from abroad, the requirement for our life to continue as it is, even assuming stability and all other things, is that the whole of the rest of the world accepts its position as the manufacturer of the goods that we will consume. Every single country which is enslaved by capital has to stay in that relationship for our life to continue stably as it is. Look around the world. Do you think that's what's happening? Do you think that's what's going to happen? No. We are going to be cut off. And we don't have the ability right now to be resilient to even the smallest shocks, to the production lines that have been spread around the world that bring the goods to our country. It's not a surprise to us, now to see, when you understand how parasitic the economy is, then you realize why it is that there are far more people engaged in logistics in our country, in delivering and distributing goods, than there are in making things, The things are all made abroad and brought in, and they're just in time. They're not even warehoused in this country. Literally, you have a strike or a disruption almost anywhere in the world, and there's a repercussion in terms of what's available to you in the supermarket. So it's extremely parasitic and extremely vulnerable, in fact, to shocks, to rebellions around the world. And this is really important to understand, that the system that looks so strong has hollowed itself out, eaten itself out from the inside, and now is like a house of cards. It's a fortress that's built on shifting sands. Imperialism right now is in crisis. It's in the deepest economic crisis it's ever been in, The only thing we have any kind of parallel to make really is the period of the 1930s, what was called then the Great Depression. And we have to now call this one the Greatest Depression. And this is a terminal decline for imperialism. There is no power in the world, no imperialist country that is able to resuscitate itself to the extent of breathing new life into this system. The USA was the country that managed to benefit and profit from World War I and World War II. At that time, its industry was still growing and expanding. The USA now is like Europe was at the time of World War I. It also has hollowed out its economy. It also is decaying, bankrupt, rotten from the inside out, unable even to plan production for the wars it's trying to wage because of the contradictions of the profit system and the advanced decay of the capitalist system. What's the response of the financiers to their crisis? It's austerity, as Joseph pointed out, destruction. We saw this also in the 1930s, that, this is where what fascism feeds on, is the need to combine austerity, destruction of productive forces, destruction even of people, destruction of accumulated wealth, with war. War to try to reinvigorate markets, war to capture territories, sources of material, and to destroy opponents of whatever type. This is the response of the imperialists to their crisis. It's the only response they can have other than putting their hands up and saying, okay, we accept. Our day is done. Our system can't resolve its own crisis. We're ready to resign. You come and take over, you proles. Well, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it without being pushed. And so the logic of their system impels them to austerity and to war. And because both of those things are unpopular, we must also have scapegoating and racism to divide the people against one another and to mobilize them for at least to be sympathetic and preferably to be active in the war drive. And alongside all of that, repression of the people who stand against what is happening and try to organize the working class. The drive to war is a sign not of the strength of imperialism, but of its systemic weakness. And the question really is, what do we need to do? What do we need to do to mobilize the people? How do we take advantage of the weakness of the system to help it to crumble and fall? First of all, of course, is the need to oppose the war drive, expose the reasons for the war, and help the workers of Britain understand that they have a side, and it's not the side of their ruling class. Our party was foundational member of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform that was formed 2 years ago. And the reason we realized it was time to form such an organization internationally to strengthen the efforts of our movement in this direction was because the launch of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine drew a line around the world. Very clearly showed there's two sides in this battle that's coming. It's a titanic battle for the future of humanity. And you have to be on a side. There's neither Washington nor Moscow. Trotsky are standing in the middle. You're on one side or you're on the other. You're for humanity or you're for imperialism. This is the choice. And what we discovered at the beginning of this war, was that in the heart of the communist movement, there is utter confusion internationally. Huge number of parties have bought into a nonsensical line that says Russia is imperialist, China is imperialist, all the wars that are coming are inter-imperialist and the workers have no side. This is utterly, scientifically has no basis. And in terms of the struggle It's a poison that demobilizes the very people who should be at the heart of the struggle. We, the communists, are the ones who have always given the steel to national liberation and anti-imperialist movements precisely because we have a scientific understanding of what is imperialism. Without our input, our steel, our knowledge, the anti-imperialist movement, no matter how vigorous, how emotional, how enthusiastic, is weak. The communist movement must be at the heart. Marxist-Leninist theory must be the guiding force. If we are to be successful, there is a huge opportunity in front of us. But we need to maximize our chances of success, and that means the communists need to be at the heart of this movement, not standing on the edge, wondering which way to go. So we wrote the Paris Declaration of the platform, and we launched it 2 years ago, this last month gone. And in it we pointed out that the workers, oppressed peoples, anti-imperialist communists of the world must support Russia, must promote a Russian victory, must support China if and when China is attacked and promote a Chinese victory. The same for Iran, the same for the DPRK. We understand all these countries are objectively standing in the way of imperialist control of the world. That is why they are targeted. They are the bedrock of the world axis of resistance. They are providing the military, economic, and political resilience to that axis. They're providing confidence to peoples all over the world that they too can rise up. I do not think it's any kind of an accident that the Palestinian resistance launched their Al-Aqsa flood operation in the wake of victory after victory of the special military operation in Ukraine, which is defeating all the power of NATO economically and militarily. You only have to go around the world and meet revolutionaries who've lived through very hard times, believe me, to see how these shifts in the balance of forces in the world are changing the consciousness and the confidence levels of workers and oppressed peoples everywhere. I was just in Senegal with my comrade Ellie for an African conference of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. And we met comrades who've been through some really hard times. You want to see defeats in struggle, you go and talk to some African revolutionaries. We met comrades from Niger, Burkina Faso, Senegal, from Congo, who retain their confidence. And Kenya, of course. And Kenya. And despite all the reverses they've suffered, they retain their confidence and their optimism. They keep working. Not only do they keep working, they feel the balance of forces shifting. They feel the ground on which they are operating becoming firmer. They see a window of opportunity opening up in front of them in Africa precisely because the imperialists are bogged down in Ukraine, bogged down in the Middle East, winning in neither place, but expending huge amounts of financial and military material and manpower. You know, look at Ukraine. The imperialists spent 30 years creating a proxy force to throw at Russia. It's a horrendous tragedy for Ukraine. That proxy force is being destroyed completely. There is no ability for the imperialists to keep building such big armies and lose them at such a rate. The amount of time it takes to build the army versus the amount of time it takes such forces as Russia to destroy them. The maths doesn't add up. Just like the maths of artillery shells don't add up, as our comrade was saying earlier. So there's a huge opportunity for the axis of resistance, but it's still not a foregone conclusion when you consider the huge economic power that still rests with the imperialists, their ability to spread lies, their ability to demoralize people, to demotivate them, to point them against one another. The thing the British in particular, but the imperialists have all learned from one another, with the British as the particular specialists, is divide and rule. How to turn workers against one another. All the false versions of nationalism, anti-imperialism, Marxism, Leninism that circulate in our midst, the way the information space is absolutely flooded with lies and false versions of Marxist politics, in order that as soon as somebody starts looking for Marxism, they'll find a false trail to follow. It becomes very, very hard to make out who are the purveyors of truth if you're just innocently looking and trying to work it out. You know, this is something the imperialists are exceptionally good at, and one of the jobs of the platform is to help to boost the voices of the genuinely revolutionary currents, which in many countries, although they are significant because of their politics, their size is small and their ability to cut through the disinformation is limited. So the platform has a role in boosting the voices and the forces of all of those genuinely anti-imperialist and revolutionary forces around the world. Our job here is to oppose the war drive and fight for the victory of the resistance. It is to bring an understanding to the masses that their side is the anti-imperialist side, that weakening their enemy is what they need to see happen in order to further their own cause, and to actively come to work with that understanding, to work to disrupt and sabotage the war effort at home on the home front. In every single country where NATO operates, which is huge number of the countries in the world, the working class needs to be given this message and mobilized. Pressure needs to be put through the trade unions from the ground upwards, because we know the leaders of our trade unions have been totally bought up. But from the ground upwards, the pressure needs to come through the ordinary members. This understanding, just as the communists led the hands-off Russia movement in 1920, successfully through the grassroots of the trade union movement, to the point where the trade union leaders, who were in no way sympathetic, were forced to threaten the ruling class with a general strike if they didn't back out of the war of intervention against young Soviet Russia. That's exactly the movement we need to spark in Britain today. We need a mass movement of non-cooperation, an anti-war movement that acts in solidarity and doesn't just pass resolutions. And of course, fundamentally, we need to work on reconnecting Marxism with the masses. That means we have to take seriously the job of mastering Marxism, every one of us, in order to build a party that's really mastered Marxism, and to build a physical network. You know, I was talking to my nephew earlier today about the power of the internet and how everybody uses the internet. You have to be online to get anywhere today. Well, we do our best in the small way that's open to us to use the internet, and we will continue to do so while it's possible. But we must never forget that the odds of getting anywhere on the internet are stacked massively against us, because it's a tool in the hands of our enemy. And more than that, as soon as we start to have success, our enemy can switch off our internet like that. So if we just tell ourselves, oh, modern technology and the internet's going to fix our problems, we are deluding ourselves. We must, while using the internet and every means at our disposal, we must understand that no revolution will ever succeed without building a physical network of people with physical literature in their hands, connected to the masses all over the country, which the ruling class cannot switch off. And as we are fighting to master Marxism and bring its scientific insights to the masses as the guiding force for mapping out our strategy, our tactics, our program, our understanding of our mission, we must recognize that alongside that is the fight against opportunism and wrong ideas in our movement. We need especially to popularize the understanding amongst the masses that every single tie that binds our movement in any way to the Labour Party must be broken. And that, of course, means fighting and opposing every single force to the left of Labour, so-called left, which calls itself socialist, calls itself communist, but ultimately works to tie the workers back to the Labour Party in some way or another. They are doing the job of imperialism. They are not helping us get towards socialism. We really must embody the lessons, the spirit, and the message of October, which, as Lenin taught us, and Marx and Engels before them, that the working class is the ruling class in waiting. They just need to be made aware of that and equipped to fulfill that historic mission. But that is their mission. It's not our job to make the revolution and build socialism. It's the working class that will do that, but it will do that only when it has grasped that that is its mission, and how it's going to do that through a vanguard organisation and through scientific socialism as its guiding theory. You know, October taught us something that can never be taken away from us. We can win. We will win. Another world is not only necessary, it is possible. I ask all our comrades, look around on the platform tonight, look around the world and realise we are not alone. What we need to do is come together. So please join us and help us build the axis of resistance in Britain.